March 23, 1945, 10:47 a.m. The aircraft engines hummed as Winston Churchill stared through the window at German soil below. Minutes from landing. Minutes from witnessing what he believed would be Britain's finest hour. His heart raced with anticipation. Field. Marshal Montgomery's Operation Plunder. The meticulously planned Rhine crossing that would prove to the world that British forces remained the professional elite of the Allied coalition. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. Then ... The radio crackled. 4 words. Just 4 words that would stop Churchill's heart cold. Patton crossed last night. Not today. Not with Montgomery's 1,000 guns and elaborate airborne drops. Not with the careful planning and British precision in the world. Expected last night, with some boats and what Patton would mockingly call a band of angry Pennsylvanians. Churchill's hands gripped the armrest. His face went pale. The message from Montgomery came through immediately, sharp and furious. 2 sentences that cut like knives. American insubordination has made a mockery of Allied planning. Patton must be relieved of command immediately. What Churchill would say in response. First to Montgomery, then to his inner circle, and finally, in a whispered confession to his personal physician, would reveal the brutal truth about alliance warfare, the crushing price of pride, and why wars are won by those willing to sacrifice protocol for results. But to understand the impossible position Churchill found himself in, you need to understand what Montgomery had been promised. January 12, 1945. Churchill himself had personally assured Montgomery that Operation Plunder would be the centerpiece of Allied victory in Europe. Not American improvisation. British professionalism, British excellence. Montgomery had spent 2 months planning this moment. 1.2 million men, 25,000 vehicles, 3,500 artillery pieces, airborne drops, smoke screens. The largest river crossing since Normandy itself. Churchill had invited war correspondents from across the globe. He'd arranged for photographers to capture British glory. He'd even personally written the communiqué celebrating British military excellence set would be released the very moment Montgomery's forces secured the eastern bank. Everything was orchestrated. Everything was ready except ... George Patton had other ideas. March 22nd, 10:37 p.m. Patton's voice came through the telephone line to Eisenhower's headquarters. Casual, almost bored. Ike, quick update. Just crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. Used assault boats. Minimal casualties. Thought you'd want to know. Eisenhower's response, captured in the telephone log, revealed his immediate understanding of the political catastrophe that had just been unleashed. George, please tell me you coordinated this with Montgomery. Patton's reply was pure Patton, arrogant, dismissive, devastating. Monty's got his own crossing tomorrow. Didn't want to bother him with details. Eisenhower hung up and immediately grabbed his chief of staff. Get me Churchill. George just created the biggest diplomatic crisis of this entire war. The storm was coming, and no one was prepared for what Churchill would have to choose. March 23rd, 6:18 a.m. Field Marshal Montgomery received the confirmation. American forces had crossed the Rhine 12 hours before Operation Plunder was scheduled to begin. 12 hours before. Multiple staff officers recorded his reaction. He didn't shout. He didn't explode. Something far more chilling happened. He went cold. Patton has deliberately sabotaged Allied strategy to satisfy his ego. Montgomery's voice was ice. This is insubordination at the strategic level. I want him relieved, court-martialed, and sent home today. His chief of staff, nervous, tried to moderate the situation. Sir, the crossing was successful. Third Army is expanding the bridgehead as we speak. Montgomery cut him off with surgical precision. Success is irrelevant. Discipline is paramount. If Patton is allowed to ignore command authority, we don't have a coalition. We have chaos. He immediately drafted a message to Churchill. Every word carefully chosen. Every sentence a demand. American general has conducted unauthorized operation violating agreed strategic framework. Request you demand Eisenhower relieve. Patton immediately. British forces cannot operate alongside commanders who ignore command structure. 9:15 a.m. Churchill received Montgomery's message minutes before his aircraft was scheduled to land in Germany. His military secretary watched as the Prime Minister read it once, twice, 3 times. His face revealed nothing but his hands. His hands trembled slightly. Ismay. What are the facts? Sir, Patton crossed at Oppenheim last night. Casualties under 30. Bridgehead secured. He did it without elaborate preparation, without Montgomery's permission. Without anyone's permission, sir. Churchill stared out the aircraft window at Germany sprawling below. The political mathematics running through his mind were absolutely brutal. Montgomery was his chosen general, his protege, the careful professional, who represented everything Churchill believed about proper military conduct, about British excellence, about doing things the right way. But Patton... Patton had just crossed Hitler's last natural barrier before Montgomery could even begin. The choice before Churchill was devastating in its simplicity. Support Montgomery, and Churchill would be demanding the firing of an American general for succeeding too quickly, for winning too efficiently, for embarrassing British planning. Support Patton, and Churchill would be undercutting British military prestige in front of the entire watching world. 10:52 a.m. Churchill's aircraft touched down. Montgomery was waiting on the tarmac, ramrod straight, face rigid with barely controlled fury. Churchill descended the stairs slowly. Montgomery saluted with military precision. Prime Minister, thank you for coming to witness Operation Plunder. Churchill's reply was carefully, dangerously neutral. Field Marshal, I received your message. Walk with me. They moved away from the assembled staff, away from listening ears. Montgomery began immediately, unable to contain himself. Prime Minister, I must insist Patton be relieved. His insubordination cannot stand. Churchill raised his hand. Stopped. Him, Montgomery, I need you to answer one question with complete honesty. The air between them crackled with tension. If Patton had asked permission to cross at Oppenheim last night, what would you have said? Montgomery didn't hesitate. Couldn't hesitate. His answer revealed everything. I would have denied it. The truth, finally spoken, hung in the cold German air like a confession. His crossing diverts attention from the main effort, Montgomery continued, his voice tight with conviction. Your main effort, Churchill replied quietly, or the Allied main effort, as agreed upon by Allied planners, Prime Minister. Churchill paused. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. By planners who gave you 2 months, and gave Patton nothing. Then came the question that would cut to the bone. Bernard, is this about strategy ... or pride? Montgomery's face flushed. Prime Minister, with respect, it's about maintaining command discipline. Churchill's response was quiet, devastating, each word carefully chosen to wound. "It's about Patton, making you look slow." The words hung in the cold German air like an accusation. Montgomery tried to respond, but Churchill wasn't finished. "Bernard, I've defended your methods for 3 years. Careful preparation, overwhelming force, minimal casualties. It's the British way, and it saved thousands of lives." He turned to face Montgomery directly. "But watching Patton cross the Rhine with boats while you needed 2 months to plan the same operation forces me to ask uncomfortable questions." Montgomery's voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained. "Prime Minister, if you're suggesting American methods are superior, I'm suggesting that American speed achieves results we can no longer match." The truth, finally spoken aloud. The admission Churchill had been avoiding for months. "The war is ending, Bernard. Germany is collapsing. Every day we spend in careful preparation is a day the Soviets advance further west. Patton understands this." Montgomery's reply was bitter, the taste of betrayal sharp in his mouth. "So you're choosing him over me?" Churchill shook his head slowly. "I'm choosing to win the war before the Soviets claim all of Europe. That requires speed we no longer possess." What Montgomery didn't know, what Churchill had been hiding, was that this internal struggle had been raging for months. December 1944. After Patton relieved Bastogne in 72 hours, Churchill had written in his private diary, "Patton does in days what takes us weeks." January 1945. Watching Montgomery's slow advance while Patton raced across France, Churchill confided to his physician, "The Americans have learned to move faster than we can think." And now, standing on this German airfield, watching Montgomery's elaborate preparations, Churchill realized the truth he'd been desperately avoiding. British military doctrine, the doctrine he'd defended throughout this entire war, had been surpassed by American operational speed. Montgomery made one final attempt. "Prime Minister, if Patton is not disciplined, you set a precedent that command authority means nothing." Churchill's response would become the most brutally honest assessment of Allied politics ever recorded. "Bernard, you're right. Patton should be disciplined. He violated protocol. He ignored coordination requirements. He made you and the entire British military establishment look foolish." He paused, took a breath. "But here's what you're not seeing. What came next would change everything. If I demand Eisenhower fire Patton, the Americans will ask why. And I'll have to explain that we're firing their most successful general because he succeeded too quickly, without British permission." Churchill's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Do you understand how that sounds?" Montgomery started to protest, but Churchill continued, relentless now, the dam finally breaking. "The Americans are providing 70% of Allied forces. They're bearing the majority of casualties. They're funding this entire operation. And their general just demonstrated he can cross the Rhine in one night with minimal preparation, while we need 2 months and 1 million men to do the same thing." The truth kept coming, each word heavier than the last. "If I demand his firing, I'm admitting that British pride matters more than Allied victory." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of distant artillery. Operation Plunder had begun. Montgomery's crossing, so meticulously planned, was finally happening. But everyone present knew it was no longer the main event. Churchill placed his hand on Montgomery's shoulder. "Bernard, you were one of Britain's finest commanders. History will remember your victories. But history will also remember that when this war's final chapter was written, An American general crossed the Rhine first. He paused, letting the words sink in. Not because he was better than you, but because he was willing to risk everything. On speed, while we calculated caution. Montgomery's response was barely audible. Broken. So I've lost. Churchill shook his head slowly. We've all lost something, Bernard. You've lost precedence. I've lost the illusion that British methods still define modern warfare. Another pause, heavy with meaning. But we're winning the war. That has to be enough. Churchill returned to his aircraft without watching Montgomery's crossing. His military secretary recorded what happened next with clinical precision. The Prime Minister sat in complete silence for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. Take dictation. The message was to General Eisenhower. General, I have received Field Marshal Montgomery's request that General Patton be relieved for unauthorized Rhine crossing. After careful consideration, I must decline to support this request. General Patton's operation, while uncoordinated, was successful and contributes to Allied objectives. I recommend no action be taken. Churchill paused before signing, then added, a handwritten postscript, his true feelings finally revealed. Ike, keep Patton moving. We can't afford to match his speed, but we can't afford to lose it either. That evening, alone with his personal physician, Lord Moran, Churchill finally dropped the mask. I've just chosen American results over British. Pride, he said, pouring himself a whiskey with shaking hands. Montgomery will never forgive me. The military establishment will be furious. He took a long drink, but watching Patton cross that river while we prepared our elaborate show made me realize something terrible. The confession that followed would never be made public. We're no longer the leading military power in this alliance. We haven't been for quite some time. I've just been too proud to admit it. Moran asked if he regretted the decision. Churchill's response was immediate, firm, final. Not for a second. Pride doesn't win wars. Speed does. Patton understands that. Montgomery doesn't. He stared into his glass. And if I have to choose between a general who protects British prestige and a general who ends this war faster, I choose the one who brings our boys home. The empire that once defined military excellence was no longer setting the standard. It was simply trying to keep pace.